The 2025 Lincoln Aviator. This has been updated for the 2025 model year, and yes, this is the mechanical cousin or twin to the Ford Explorer. Let's talk about price first and what this competes with. This is a 3-row SUV, and due to the fact that it starts at just under $60,000 and is fully loaded north of $90,000, this has a very large competitive set. On the lower end of the price, you could say this competes with an MDX Type S or Acura MDX, maybe a Lexus TX. And when you fully load this thing, it competes with the big boys, things like the BMW X7, Audi Q7, and arguably something like a Mercedes GLS. This has a very competitive set of vehicles that you have to look past before you get into the Aviator. So if you are looking at an Aviator, let's walk you through what they've changed for 25 and what it's actually like to live with. So new front and rear fascias. This has the latest software for the Aviator, a brand new screen. It is Google-based. It actually works quite well, though all of the controls for the HVAC and the infotainment are touch-related. You have physical controls for things like drive modes, traction control, stop-start, and your steering wheel controls are traditional, which is great. You have pretty decent-looking screens, and honestly, the Revell audio system is really not bad at all. And I would argue it's actually better than, say, a bass Harman you find in a BMW X7, though it's not quite as good as what you find in, say, an MDX Type S. From an interior fit and finish side of things, it's not as good as, say, the Acura, Lexus, or BMWs of the world, but I think it's probably a step above something like a Cherokee L, for example, or a Cadillac XT6. Those are not high bars to cross. It's quieter in here than a Ford Explorer, but noisier than an MDX Type S or a BMW X7, at least to my ear. They've done a good job trying to hide some of the Fordness to this interior, though you do share the same switchgear. The seats have the same seating position, but once you move up the options, the seats are very, very comfortable in this Lincoln. Much better than you find on a Ford and better than a lot of its competitors. The massage function works quite well. They're very supportive. The noise floor in this vehicle is reasonable, and again, the audio system is quite good. Second row seats are captain's chairs. Third row is a bench, at least in this trim level. The second row is fairly comfortable. Third row is only good enough for, let's say, smaller adults or children. Good trunk space, great door storage, good center console storage. And Blue Cruise, which is their hands-free driving aid in this car, assuming it can recognize your eyeballs, which it struggles with mine, does a pretty good job. I would say it's not quite on par with Super Cruise and something like a Cadillac Escalade, but it is quite good. It's definitely one of the better ones in the segment. So let's head in the shop and put this thing up on the lift. In the shop with a Lincoln Aviator. This is the 2025 model, and as we've already mentioned, this is built on the same platform, basically a mechanical twin to the Ford Explorer, which means it's the CD6 underneath. This thing is a rear-wheel drive architecture. It is a multi-link front, multi-link rear, and for the Aviator, you can have this either with adaptive dampers with reed head technology or adaptive dampers with air springs, which gives us a little bit better spread and ride comfort and firms up some of the body control of the vehicle. One of the things that is sort of a hindrance to the Lincoln is while platform sharing is not a new concept, far from it in the automotive space, unlike most of its rivals, this is starting with a non-premium car platform that has to be scaled up to be a vehicle that's $90,000. In the case of a BMW, an X7, it's on CLAR, a Q7's on MLB Evo, even the Acura MDX is on a luxury car variant of their small truck platform, which means it gets double wishbone in the front. This, at least to my eyes, is largely identical to a Ford Explorer. So again, this doesn't have the body structure or sound deadening that something like a Q7, an MDX, or even a X7 has, which hurts this car, and we're going to talk about why when we're driving it. From a drivetrain side of things, Ford's 10-speed that you have experienced throughout its years, it's definitely better than it used to be. Its software is radically improved, and this gets the Ford twin-turbo EcoBoost 3-liter V6. In this application, it makes 405 horsepower and 415 foot-pounds of torque. One of its benefits versus its German rivals is this will happily run at 87 with a small decrease in overall power, and this will tow 5,000 pounds. So let's go take this for a quick drive. Setting off in the Lincoln Aviator. Look, this is a very difficult class of car to compete in, particularly for a brand like Lincoln. You know, if you're getting into this car, you are looking over basically every premium brand's three-row SUV. That said, I think from the driving side of things, Lincoln does a pretty good job on execution. Drivetrain, this is nowhere as smooth as something like a B58 or even the turbocharged V6 in an Audi or the turbocharged V6 in the Acura MDX Type S, but it's far from bad. The 10-speed does a really good job making sure that this is in the power band, and while it does not return the world's greatest fuel economy, the fact that you can easily run this on 87 without any real performance dips, at least noticeable ones, is not a bad thing. The gearbox cal too, unlike earlier 10-speed applications on the regular Ford Explorer, I think Ford has done a really good job pulling out some of the weird herky-jerky nature of this gearbox, and most of the time you never notice it, which is not something I could say in some of the Explorers I've driven. You know, this is not a car you're going to be going flat out in, but you know, it does a good job pulling away from intersections, no harsh or hard shifts for that matter. When it comes to suspension tuning, when you pull this thing out of Excite mode and you put it into normal, it's fairly soft. I don't think the body structure and the suspension isolates you from expansion joints and some of the impacts the same way like an X7 on Clar or a vehicle in MLB Evo does, or for that matter, the MDX Type S's architecture. But I think it does a pretty good job, and it doesn't have the head bob and toss as something like a Cherokee L has with its air ride, or something like the old Cadillac XT6, which felt like you were rolling around on a waterbed. I think from an input side of things as well, nothing is particularly direct in this car, but it's not so numb that you have no idea where you're placing the vehicle. It's totally adequate. It's not something that fatigues you at all. And when you're driving on long highway journeys, Mark and I put almost 1,000 miles on this car going back and forth from Michigan. It never wanders, it never does anything odd in that regards. And when Blue Cruise is working, when it actually recognizes your eyeballs, something that for a variety of reasons probably, not to mention my squinty eyes, this thing struggles with. The eye tracking straight up does not work for me in this car, but it works for Mark. It does a good job pulling some of that fatigue out of you. From a road noise side of things, again, it's quieter than something like an Explorer. It's smaller, lesser sibling, but it's not as quiet as an X7. The braking, the steering, the throttle mapping is all very like smooth and Michael McDonald levels of smooth. Of, like, it never upsets you. It just puts you in this like nursing home feel where you just like are waiting to drift off. Which in a big luxury SUV like this, I don't hate that, if I'm going to be honest. Right? There's no faux sportiness to this. This is just, it does kind of what they set out to do. Create a nicer Ford Explorer with a nicer interior space that competes well in sort of that, luxury SUV space. And I do think compared to its American rivals, specifically the Cadillac non-truck based SUVs and even the Grand Cherokee L, this is a better vehicle to actually drive and live with. So let's head into the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the Lincoln Aviator. Now there's two ways to look at this vehicle. I'm going to start with a positive. If you're going to compare this to domestic rivals like the Grand Cherokee L or the Cadillac XT6, I would take this over both of those options. I think as a luxury, non-truck based SUV, this is not a bad vehicle. However, if you're comparing this to its European and Asian premium car rivals, this is a much tougher vehicle to necessarily recommend. The main vehicle that comes to mind that sort of fits in the non-premium premium class that Lincoln exists with is the MDX Type S. And that vehicle rides better, honestly, despite being a front-wheel drive architecture. It handles better audio system, and it's quieter. And it returns similar fuel economy. And that's the problem the Aviator has. I think because Ford keeps it on a largely similar platform to the Explorer, and that car doesn't have to go to $90,000, it handicaps what the Aviator can be. And I think that's something that they're going to have to reconcile with in the future if they want to compete in the premium class. This thing has to be based on a nicer vehicle than the Explorer. Is the Aviator nicer than the Explorer? Yes, better interior space. I think it's styled maybe a little bit better. The interior is better with its software implementation. It's nicer to be in, but you're not just competing against an Explorer or a Cherokee L or an XT6. Other companies make very, very good luxury SUVs now, and that's where Lincoln finds itself. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.